Ancient Egypt wasn't solely about pyramids, mummies, and pharaohs. Beneath the hieroglyphs and golden masks, Egyptians engaged in sexual practices so unusual they would make contemporary people blush under their sunscreen. These weren't mere private curiosities. They were deeply interwoven with their religion, political system, and daily existence in ways that sculpted one of history's most enduring civilizations. From divine masturbation myths to gods with detachable glowing phalluses, you are about to uncover why ancient Egyptian sexuality was as intricate and compelling as their monumental structures. What you will discover comes from documented historical records, temple reliefs, papyri, and archaeological findings that reveal a culture where sexuality wasn't concealed, but was celebrated as a divine force. The Egyptian creation narrative commences with a god pleasuring himself. According to texts from the Pyramid Age, the cosmos began when Adam, the primordial deity, generated himself from the chaotic waters of Nun. Solitary in the universe, Adam masturbated, and from his ejaculation sprang the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut, who would proceed to create the remaining gods, and eventually humanity. This wasn't some minor legend. It was fundamental to Egyptian cosmology, depicted on temple walls throughout the kingdom. At Karnak Temple, you can still observe carvings illustrating Adam with his hand on his phallus, generating the universe through divine ejaculation. Egyptians did not regard this as inappropriate. They saw it as the ultimate creative deed, the instant when nothingness transformed into being. Even more extraordinary is that Egyptian pharaohs reenacted this creation myth as an official state ritual. During the Nile River's annual flood, the inundation that sustained Egyptian agriculture, the pharaoh would conduct a public masturbation ceremony at the river's edge. This was not some personal royal fetish. It was an essential religious rite, observed by priests and officials, documented in temple inscriptions, and noted by foreign visitors like Herodotus and Diodorus. The pharaoh's semen, like Adam's, was believed to hold divine creative potency. By ejaculating into the Nile, the king magically guaranteed the river would flood to the appropriate height, delivering the fertile silt that made Egypt's agricultural success possible. If the Nile flooded too little, famine ensued. Too much, and settlements would be destroyed. The pharaoh's masturbation ritual was literally responsible for the survival of the entire civilization. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Luxor and Karnak shows special chambers, where pharaohs would prepare for this ritual, with inscriptions detailing the exact religious incantations they would recite while performing the act. The Egyptian term for this ceremony, shade, appears in numerous royal texts, always associated with fertility and abundance. Imagine the immense pressure on these pharaohs. The entire kingdom was watching, anticipating your divine masturbation to safeguard the growing season. Talk about performance anxiety. No wonder pharaohs were regarded as living gods. They were expected to command the cosmos through their sexual potency. Death did not signify the end of pleasure for ancient Egyptians. Their elaborate conception of the afterlife included a fully functional, resurrected body, complete with all the sexual capabilities they enjoyed in life. The Egyptian Book of the Dead and tomb art display the deceased enjoying food, drink, and indeed, sex in the field of reeds, their version of paradise. This sexual afterlife originates with the myth of Osiris, Egypt's god of the deceased. According to temple documents, Osiris was slain by his brother Seth, who dismembered his body into 14 pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Osiris's consort, Isis, recovered 13 of these fragments, but could not locate the 14th, his penis. Undeterred, Isis fashioned a magical phallus for her dead husband, attached it to his reassembled body, and used it to conceive their son, Horus. This was more than just a colorful tale. It established the standard for all Egyptian resurrection. The opening of the mouth ceremony performed on mummies carried explicit sexual undertones. Priests would touch various parts of the mummy with specialized tools, symbolically restoring their senses, including sexual function. The Egyptian word for this ceremony, eerie, has linguistic links to words denoting sexual power. Tomb paintings from the Valley of the Kings show the deceased engaging in sexual activities in the afterlife. The Turin erotic papyrus, currently housed in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, illustrates various sexual positions that Egyptians fully expected to indulge in after their death. These details were not concealed. They formed part of the official religious iconography. Perhaps most striking is the physical evidence of genital preservation during mummification. Male mummies frequently had artificial phalluses constructed for them, while female mummies sometimes featured artificial vulvas molded from resin. CT scans of royal mummies have unveiled these intimate particulars, confirming the Egyptian belief that sexual organs were essential equipment for the afterlife journey. For them, a sexless eternity was simply undesirable. Their paradise included unending youth, plentiful food and drink, and unlimited sexual gratification. When pharaohs like Tutankhamun were interred with vast collections of funerary goods, these included objects intended for sexual pleasure in the next world. 2. The Festival of Min, public sexual celebration. If you believe modern festivals are wild, they cannot compare to the Festival of Min, ancient Egypt's most sexually explicit public celebration. Min was the god of fertility and sexual potency, typically depicted with an enormous erect phallus held in one hand. His annual festival was essentially a massive, public celebration of male sexual power. Temple reliefs at Luxor and Karnak display the Festival of Min in graphic detail. The central event was a procession where priests carried a substantial statue of Min, complete with his erect phallus, through the streets. This was no small religious figure. It was a life-size divine statue with a phallus so large it required its own team of bearers. As Min's statue progressed through the town, women would line the route and expose themselves to the divine image. This act was not considered obscene, but a fertility ritual. By exposing themselves to Min's divine phallus, women hoped to absorb his procreative power and conceive. Unmarried women were particularly active, seeking to attract both divine blessing and human husbands. One of the strangest elements of the Min festival was the sacred function of lettuce. Egyptians believed certain lettuce varieties resembled an ejaculating phallus when broken, as a white milky liquid would emerge from the stem. During the festival, lettuce was presented to Min as a holy food. The festival culminated with the release of 4 wild bulls, representing Min's virility, into the countryside to mate with cows, symbolically spreading the god's fertility across the land. Meanwhile, the pharaoh would ritually cut a sheath of grain, symbolizing his own sexual potency and its connection to agricultural prosperity. Point 3. Ancient contraception and abortion. Despite their focus on procreation, Egyptians were remarkably inventive when it came to preventing unwanted pregnancy. The Kahun gynecological papyrus and the Ebers papyrus, dating from around 1850 BC, contained some of history's earliest contraceptive recipes, which were both bizarre and clever. Crocodile dung, the most notorious Egyptian contraceptive, involved crocodile dung mixed with honey and sodium carbonate and inserted into the vagina as a pet. Modern scientists have noted that crocodile dung is highly alkaline, which would create an environment hostile to sperm. Acacia gum. More effective was their use of acacia gum as a modern analysis confirms that acacia contains lactic acid, still used in some spermicidal jellies today. Women would mix acacia tips with honey and dates, soak lint in the mixture, and insert it vaginally. Hormonal methods. For those desiring longer-term solutions, medical texts recommended drinking a concoction of mashed pomegranate and beer. Pomegranate seeds contain natural estrogen, which could potentially interfere with fertility. When contraception failed, Egyptians had recipes for releasing blocked menstruation, their euphemism for abortion. The Ebers papyrus recommends a blend of dates, onions, and an unidentified plant ground in beer. Women also relied on magical protection, wearing amulets of the god base and using incantations to bind the womb against conception. 4. The tradition of royal incest. Pharaohs routinely married their siblings. Royal incest was not merely permitted in ancient Egypt. It was actively encouraged, especially during the Ptolemaic period. Divine precedent. This practice was justified by divine precedent, as gods frequently married their siblings. For example, Osiris married Isis. Famous examples. The most famous practitioner was Cleopatra VII, who married her younger brother Ptolemy the 13th, and later his even younger brother Ptolemy. 14. DNA evidence. DNA analysis of Tutankhamun's mummy revealed his parents were brother and sister. Political motivation. The primary reason was to keep power and wealth within the family and preserve the divine bloodline, which Egyptians believed carried the essence of the gods' Henotic consequences. The genetic results were predictably severe. Tutankhamun's mummy shows multiple congenital defects, including a clubfoot and cleft palate. Egyptians, however, rationalized these birth defects not as divine punishment, but as marks of divine heritage. Physical proof that the pharaohs were not fully human. 5. Herodotus and the necrophilia claim. One of the most unsettling claims about ancient Egyptian sexuality comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who asserted that beautiful deceased women were not given to embalmers until 3 days after death, because there had been cases of necrophilia by the embalmers. Plausibility. While the claim has been debated, archaeological evidence does confirm that embalming was often delayed for practical reasons: purification, organ removal, awareness of taboo. Egyptian texts themselves suggest an awareness of the taboo. The negative confession in the Book of the Dead includes the line, "I have not had sexual relations with a corpse." This indicates that necrophilia was recognized as a serious potential transgression. Protection of integrity. The 3-day waiting period may have indeed been a practical precaution against violations, as sexual violation would have been seen as a horrific desecration, threatening the deceased's afterlife journey. Ancient Egyptian sexuality was inseparable from their religion, politics, and daily life. Their practices might seem bizarre to modern eyes, but they reveal a culture that viewed sexuality as a natural, divine force essential to cosmic order and survival.